Indira-Natasha Prahst, a Vancouver-based sociologist from Langara College's Department of Sociology and Anthropology. She specialises in human rights and spoke about the threat of Hindutva at the Sikh lobby on human rights organised by the APPG for British Sikhs.
Thank you for inviting me to participate in this important meeting and to raise awareness concerning, I think, a historical moment. And I just want to say that in light of the massive farmer global protest, I think we also need to contextualize it in a larger context. If we look at the agricultural laws in India, we have to recognize it as a continuation of political violence. And it is part of India's nation building project. So we mustn't be surprised when we see this kind of resistance. And it's not just an economic tiger that India is building, but also under an ideology of Hindutva. We cannot lose sight of this analysis, because globally, when you have governments building their nations that are grounded ideologically, there's very little recourse for the minorities resisting it. If we look at the United Nations, which I think is an important target that can put pressure on reducing some of the violence that is conferred towards the protesters, we also have to look at the language. And if we look at the genocide and the definitions in the context of a weakening or destroying a people in part or whole, I would argue that the three farm laws are a continuation of this political violence towards minorities that resist the very establishment of the Indian nation, and it is a form of economic genocide. If we look at the laws, they benefit corporate capitalism, they benefit the nations that benefit economically. And we've seen historically the corporate complicity in genocide in Darfur. India is also no different in terms of the corporate players. When we look at the precarity of the farmers with respect to the mental stress, the increase in the suicide, and again, the key goal here that is important is the dependency on the corporations. And we can't forget, in the 1960s, India had a food deficit, and it was actually dependent on America. And if we are to go into the future with the corporate control, we will see farmers also in that precarious situation. And what I think is important to illuminate is that we have heard how much violence towards the protesters exists, again, against the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in freedom of expression, and also the freedom to protest. So I think the strategy is that we know, and even in our previous meetings with the United Nations, India is very sensitive to its reputation. And it has lost control in demonstrating that India is democratic, because these very laws haven't undergone a democratic process. So I think we have to prevent further violence. We really need to target leaders. I mean, the American president supported the laws in the name of progress. I think it is important to raise awareness of how corporations benefit and how this will very much exacerbate the violence, because the farmers have nothing to lose. And anyone who has studied any resistance movement will know that the violence will exacerbate to a point where governments are going to crush a people to such an extent because the farmers are willing to lose their lives for it. So this is, I would argue, a form of caste imperialism. And in closing, I just want to say that we have to contextualize the farmer protest in a larger historical context. I would argue it's a continuation of genocidal violence, in this form, a hidden form of economic violence towards a minority. It's not just Sikhs, but Sikhs do constitute a majority numerically, not in power. But we also have Dalits and many other precarious individuals that resist the Indian nation, and that's why they are targeted. And I would say that if we want to garner more support, we have to use unified language. We have to go back to the fact that it's a violation of human rights and connect it to a larger trajectory of a goal of a Hindutva nation. And I'm seeing that there are many different narratives, and we have done a great job globally to debunk the narratives of defaming the movement. But at the same time, as a sociologist, I would firmly stick to the historical context, which means that the political protest came out of the Green Revolution, historically, and it will continue to always have a political connection. And politics means power, having power over their own lives and well-being and their land.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Indira. Really, really appreciate you joining us. And I know it's early morning in Vancouver.